Hi guys, it's me Chazza HD and welcome to this preview for this weekend's 2022 Singapore Grand Prix. Great to be back for some Formula 1 action this weekend. Honestly, the break since the last Grand Prix feels like we've had like another summer break. It feels like it's been quite a while since the last Grand Prix, and obviously we had a triple header of Spa, Zandvoort and Monza. It's been quite a while, it feels like, again, since the Italian Grand Prix. We've only got, obviously, 6 races left on the F1 calendar, and it is great to be back in Asia for the first time since 2019. Unless I'm wrong and we have been to Asia since 2019, but I'm just horribly misremembering. Pretty sure we haven't, and yeah, great to be back in Asia and in Singapore for what is going to be this weekend a very competitive, and I think certainly in qualifying, a very exciting weekend. The race on the Sunday, it does depend on certain things happening, I think, really, for us to get, a classic Singapore Grand Prix, but we'll see what happens with that. But it is going to be an exciting weekend, there's no doubt about it. It's not going to be a weekend where we know already pretty much who's gonna win the Grand Prix and what the pecking order is going to look like. I think this weekend that's not quite settled, and obviously in this preview I will go through all the teams and I will predict how I think they'll do around this circuit, and obviously get into a couple more things as well, such as stats for certain teams and drivers, the championship standings going into this weekend's Grand Prix, and I will be getting into the championship permutations for Max Verstappen and showing what he needs compared to Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc to win the title this weekend in Singapore. Spoiler alert, he's going to need quite a lot this weekend to win the World Championship, but he is very, very close to doing so. And he's probably going to win it, either this weekend or most likely it's going to be in Japan, where he wins the World Championship. But yeah, he's very close now to getting his second consecutive world title. Hopefully all you guys, by the way, are doing well after this break since the last Grand Prix at Monza. And hopefully with me this evening, you'll join me in previewing this weekend's Singapore Grand Prix. And as well, I hope you'll join me for the content this weekend for Singapore. I will get into letting you guys know what the plan is in terms of content for this weekend and the timings of when I'm going live and how long for, and all of that. I will get into that probably a couple times in the stream. I did post my full schedule for this weekend on my community tab. If you go to the second post down, and at the moment as this is being streamed, you'll see what my schedule is for the Singapore Grand Prix this weekend. But yeah, good to be back. Great to be back for some Formula 1 action. And I cannot wait for this doubleheader at 2 circuits. The first one, obviously, Marina Bay circuit in Singapore. And then, obviously, Suzuka next weekend in Japan. 2 circuits that are very challenging in their own right. Singapore, obviously, street circuit, but, under the lights. And there are so many corners. It's so hot and humid. And it's such a physical monster, this Grand Prix. And is so physically tough on the drivers and even the teams, obviously team personnel, and the cars itself, that it is a real endurance test, this Singapore Grand Prix. And obviously Suzuka is more a test of the driver's skill, because it is one of the best circuits in the world without doubt. So yeah, I'm looking forward a lot to this double header coming up, obviously this weekend in Singapore, next weekend in Japan. But I think before we get into the teams, let me first get into the championship standings going into Singapore Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen currently leads the Drivers' Championship by 116 points from Charles Leclerc in second. Sergio Perez is third, only 9 points behind Leclerc in the battle for second. Russell in the Mercedes is only 16 points behind Leclerc, so it's going to be a very close fight for second in the Drivers' Championship for the rest of the season. Carlos Sainz is in fifth with Lewis Hamilton sixth, and then the rest of the top 10, Norris, Ocon, Alonso and Bottas. By the way, yeah, Verstappen is 116 points clear. He needs to be at least 138 points clear at the conclusion of the Singapore Grand Prix to be world champion, which, to be honest, given how quick Ferrari I think are going to be this weekend, and Perez, as long as he doesn't have any major trouble, he should be decently up there this weekend as well. It's not very likely that Verstappen is going to be champion, but it is definitely possible mathematically this weekend. And like I said, we'll get into that in a moment. On the constructor side, Red Bull are leading by 139 points, is it? I think it is. Yeah, 139 points from Ferrari in second. Mercedes are 35 points behind Ferrari. Mercedes obviously in third. And given this track, given this track and the certain elements of this venue that will suit Mercedes, I think Mercedes might start to again gain on Ferrari in the championship. We did see for quite a while before the summer break that Mercedes were progressively gaining on Ferrari in the constructors table. The last couple races that's kind of stalled out, but I think with this Grand Prix at least, they will start to gain again in that fight for second. Alpine are fourth, McLaren are fifth, but they did close the gap by a further 6 points. The gap is now 18 points in Alpine's favour. Obviously, Alpine didn't score any points at Monza, and McLaren scored 6 with Lando Norris. Alfa Romeo are in 6th, with Haas in 7th. AlphaTauri only a point behind Haas now in P8, with Aston Martin 9th and Williams in P10. So, yeah, those are your constructor standings. I don't know, by the way, the permutations as to when Red Bull can win the Constructors Championship. I think it's probably going to be until probably the US or Mexican Grand Prix, to be honest, until they can win the Constructors title. I don't think they're far enough ahead at the minute to win the Constructors title. I mean, I think there's probably a chance they could win it at Suzuka, but Ferrari would need to go full Ferrari, like they did, for example, in Baku, for that to happen, I think. But we'll see when they clinch the Constructors Championship. But let's get into the teams themselves. And of course, we will start with Red Bull Racing. And yeah, what a triple header they had. 3 wins in a row. Max Verstappen winning all 3. Not in the easiest fashion. Obviously, Spa and Monza, where he was always going to be the favourite. He came from lower grid positions. Still made it look pretty easy, though. And then the Dutch Grand Prix, his home Grand Prix, probably didn't. I think there's definitely an argument that you could present that he maybe didn't deserve to win that Grand Prix because there were other drivers in the race that were quicker or performing better. And I definitely think Verstappen, to a certain extent, did get a bit lucky in that race with, safety car being called and also Mercedes making the strategy mistakes they did. But in the end, 3 wins in a row, and he has also, Max Verstappen, won the last 5 Grand Prix. France, Hungary, Belgium, Holland, and Italy. That's 5 wins in a row, which I don't think Verstappen has ever done before. And with 6 races to go, Verstappen, I think, definitely has the potential to win the final 6 races. I don't think he will win all 6 races. I think that with the car they have, I don't think that's as possible as it was, say, for Sebastian Vettel back in 2013 in the Red Bull, because I think the Red Bull back then was a little bit more dominant compared to its rivals at the time, compared to, what the Red Bull car is like now. But he's definitely going to win Verstappen, probably at least 3 of the final 6 races, probably 4 at least, I think you could argue, of the final 6 races. But yeah, in terms of this weekend, Max Verstappen, like I said, he can win the championship this weekend, but it will take mostly Leclerc and Perez having a very difficult Grand Prix, and really him relying on Ferrari implosion with Charles Leclerc for Max Verstappen to win the World Championship this weekend. We know Ferrari implosion is possible, but considering who I think will be the quicker teams this weekend, it might be a bit more difficult this weekend for that to occur. In terms of this Grand Prix and the track and who should be quick or quicker out of Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, I don't see Red Bull having the pace in qualifying to be ahead of Ferrari. I think Ferrari will be on pole position with Charles Leclerc because I just think this track suits their car so well. And in a similar way to Spa, where that track suited Red Bull so well, and because it suited them so well and the lap was so long, they were able to have an even bigger gap than normal to their rivals because it was a track that suited them so well but was longer and was able to give them, again, that bigger gap. It'll kind of play out the same way for Ferrari this weekend. This is one of the circuits on the calendar that really does suit their car well, and because it's a longer lap and there are so many corners, that will give Ferrari a bigger gap from them to the rest. So, in my view, Ferrari are the favourites for pole position, and given how hard it is to overtake here, most probably race victory this weekend. The only thing really that could stop Ferrari in the race, I think, is Red Bull outdoing Ferrari on strategy, doing maybe what Ferrari did in 2019, the last Singapore Grand Prix, which is going for an undercut and gaining 3-4 seconds on Ferrari and getting their way past. But really, just having better tyre wear and looking after their tyres better and being able to have good tyre life and better tyre life than Ferrari, I think will be the key. If Red Bull are going to win the Grand Prix this weekend, never mind making sure Max Verstappen wins the World Championship. So it's going to be a difficult weekend, a lot more difficult than the triple header we just had. This is probably going to be the most difficult weekend for Red Bull since Hungary. I know obviously they won the Hungarian Grand Prix, but if you look at what happened in qualifying and how they had to really fight their way through and win the Grand Prix on the Sunday, it was a much harder weekend than they've had a lot of times this season. So, and I know obviously Max Verstappen had his engine issue, but I don't think Red Bull necessarily in qualifying had quite the pace to be right up there at the very top of the timesheets. But yeah, it's going to be a tough weekend for Red Bull. I mean, given how likely it is that Ferrari will implode, they could absolutely still win the race this weekend. I'm not saying they're not going to, or that their chances are not that high. I mean, they've probably still got a 30 to 40% chance at least of winning the race, so it's still a good chance of them winning in Singapore. But if it plays out, let me redo that. If Ferrari don't make any big errors this weekend in qualifying or the race, which I know for them is very difficult, somehow for them it's more difficult for them to have a clean weekend than, a messy one. If they don't make any big errors, Ferrari, they really should win the race this weekend, because as long as they don't get any strategy decisions in the race on Sunday, wrong on a big scale, then no one's going to be able to overtake them on this track, even with these cars that follow better, unless Red Bull have, much, much fresher tyres. And we'll have to see whether they, could get into that type of position in the race on Sunday. But yeah, Red Bull, I think most likely they will be with Verstappen finishing second or third, and then Perez will probably be fifth or sixth. I just don't think Red Bull have quite the car this weekend to be right at the very front of the field. But let's get into some stats regarding Red Bull at Singapore and just as of late in Formula One with not just Red Bull, but Max Verstappen as well. So Max Verstappen has never won the Singapore Grand Prix. His best finish here was second in 2018. A great drive from Verstappen. He had so many reliability problems that weekend and so many, I think, engine cutouts he had during the race with the Renault power unit he had at the time. So it was a great drive from Verstappen to finish second. Red Bull's last win in Singapore, amazingly, was in 2013 with Sebastian Vettel, which the reason I say amazingly is because if you go look at the Grand Prix since 2013 here in Singapore, they've always been very competitive here, but they've never been able to pull off the win since Vettel in 2013. 2014, I think they were leading with maybe a lap or so, not a lap or so to go, I think 3 or 4 laps to go with Vettel, and then Hamilton on fresher tyres overtook him to win. 2015, I think Ricciardo finished in second. 2016, Ricciardo, if you remember, was on fresher tyres, hunting Rosberg down for the win. And if there had only been 5 more laps, I think Ricciardo would have won that race. And then, 2017, 2018, they finished in second in both those races. And then 2019, Verstappen finished third. So they've always had a quick car here, but they've just never been able to get the job done in Singapore. We'll see if they can this weekend. They've been able to a lot in 2022, as we know. Verstappen has also, though, now won 5 consecutive races in 2022. And that is the longest winning streak Max Verstappen has ever had in his Formula One career. I think earlier this season, he went on a 3-race winning streak of, Imola, Miami, Spain. And if I think back to last year in 2021, he had a winning streak of, I think the longest winning streak he had that year was 3 as well, which was, France, and then the 2 Austrian races that year. So, he is absolutely on fire right now, and Max Verstappen is, even if the Red Bull car, like I said, I don't think it's going to be quite the best car around this track, he is going to be very competitive. There is no doubt about that. Even though this circuit is physically such a tough race on the drivers and is so tough for the cars with the heat and humidity and how bumpy the track is and all of that, it is also a massive test and really does show the skill of the drivers. Normally, the absolute best drivers on the grid will show why they are some of the best drivers on the grid at this track. We've had, classic pole position laps here from, Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc. Obviously, in the last Singapore Grand Prix we had in 2019, it is a real drivers, circuit, and it's such a tough circuit as well, which for me is why I love this Grand Prix. I know it is hard to overtake, but because it's so tough on the cars and drivers, that's why I love this track and just venue so much, because it does challenge everyone so much. But let's quickly, before we get on to Ferrari, get into the championship permutations. And I'll just quickly scroll up. So this is how Max Verstappen in Singapore can win the championship. So for Max to win, he needs, let me just move it across there you go. For Max to win the championship, he needs either first place with the fastest lap and Perez to finish 4th or lower and Leclerc to finish 8th or lower, or Max needs to win the race, hope that Perez finishes 4th with no fastest lap and Leclerc finishes 9th or lower, which is why I say that it's not very likely that Max is going to win the championship this weekend, because as long as Ferrari deliver on the pace I think they'll have and don't have a massive implosion, I don't think Leclerc's going to finish 8th or lower. So essentially what Max needs to do is he needs to win the race. If he doesn't win the race, by the way, he can't win the championship this weekend. I don't think so. No, I don't think he can. I think he has to win the race this weekend if he's going to be world champion. So, what he needs to do, essentially, in simple terms, is win the race, hope that Perez doesn't finish on the podium and doesn't get the fastest lap, and that Charles Leclerc doesn't finish the race. If that happens, Max Verstappen is world champion. But if, it plays out, if we don't have, a very mental Singapore Grand Prix, then most likely, Verstappen, I think, wins the championship at the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, which, to be honest, would be, I think, a better place for him to win it at because of, the history of that track, the amount of legends that won titles there, and as well, the power unit he has is still basically a Honda power unit. So it will be a great occasion if he was to win the title at Suzuka. And if you didn't know, the drivers that have won a championship at Suzuka are, Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna. Who else? Michael Schumacher when he was at Ferrari, obviously in 2000. Mika Hakkinen, Damon Hill. Who else? Did Alonso win one of his championships? No, I don't think he did. Oh yeah, Sebastian Vettel as well. So yeah, Vettel, Schumacher, Hakkinen, Hill, Senna, Prost, PK. You know what I mean? It's winning a title at Suzuka is a legendary thing to do. And that's what is on the horizon for Max Verstappen. But like I said, given these permutations, not going to be the easiest thing to do for the Flying Dutchman. So now let's go on to Ferrari. And yeah, the Italian Grand Prix was a tough weekend for them. I mean, they did get pole position with Charles Leclerc, and they did start the race from pole position. But, you know, not winning the Italian Grand Prix for Ferrari when starting on pole position is a tough pill for any Ferrari team member or fan, really, to swallow, given that the opportunity was absolutely there to get a home win. And, you never know when Ferrari's next home win at Monza might be. Might not be for a while. Remember, before 2019, when Charles Leclerc won that Grand Prix for Ferrari, I think it was 9 years previous to that, is when Fernando Alonso got the win for Ferrari in 2010, which was quite a long drought for the Ferrari team, not winning that home Grand Prix. And yeah, it was definitely a disappointing one for the Ferrari team. Whether it was, the strategy mistake that cost them the victory at Monza, or it was just Max Verstappen was just too quick, you can make your own minds up about that. For me, Max Verstappen would have won that race anyway, but Ferrari made it a bit easier for Verstappen and Red Bull than it really should have been. But yeah, disappointing for Ferrari, but they come here with, here to Singapore with nothing to lose. And they should have, like I said, the best car at this track. The reason that I didn't get into quite when I was talking about Red Bull, the reasons I think that Ferrari will have the best car here is because they have the best car, Ferrari, in the medium and slow speed corners. They've had that advantage since the start of the season. It hasn't really swayed in any other team's direction. They have had, again, clearly the best car in medium and slow speed corners. That's why they were so quick in Barcelona, Monaco earlier in the season, and even Hungary and the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard as well. And those tracks are kind of similar in their own ways to this circuit, Marina Bay circuit in Singapore. So yeah, that's the main reason why Ferrari will be the best team this weekend on pace. But also, Ferrari have very good traction out slow corners, and there are a lot of slow corners here. So that's another big advantage for the Ferrari team here in Singapore. And as long as they don't fuck things up, I don't see how Ferrari don't get pole position. It will take a Lewis Hamilton 2018-esque pole lap for someone else to get on pole position, unless Ferrari make a big error. I don't see how Ferrari don't end up on pole position. If they can get the front row, though, then, which I think is definitely possible, especially when you consider that Carlos Sainz has a very good record here in Singapore. Sainz finished in the points here, I think, in 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, all for midfield teams, and was always, when we raced here in Singapore in the past, was always Carlos very, very quick here. So he should be very competitive as well, not just Charles Leclerc for the Ferrari team. And if they do have a 1-2 in qualifying, which, like I said, I think is possible, then what they would be able to do is control the race, and even, if possible, and if Charles Leclerc has the pace, to let Leclerc, run off a bit into the distance and build a bit of a lead, so that he can protect himself from any undercuts from cars behind. We'll have to see, of course, in the race on Sunday, whether first Ferrari have a front row lockout and whether they have the pace to do that. But I think they've definitely got a very good chance of winning this Grand Prix, Ferrari. And do I think they will win the Grand Prix? I'm going to say no. And the reason is because even though I've laid out why, all the reasons why I think they'll have the best car this weekend, and I think they'll be on pole position at least with most likely Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari, we know what this team's like. I mean, look at Monaco, for example, where, I used that Grand Prix as an example of Ferrari being so quick. That weekend, locked out the front row. After the first 20 laps, we thought Ferrari were going to comfortably win that race. It seemed pretty difficult to see Red Bull or anyone else winning that Grand Prix other than Ferrari. And really, Ferrari, they were heading for a comfortable 1-2 finish because Carlos Sainz and the second Ferrari wasn't really under massive pressure from the two Red Bulls behind. And look at how that race unfolded and just collapsed, fell apart, whatever term you want to use for it. And that's what I think will happen again, because strategy here in Singapore, even though it is hard to overtake, it is very important when you make that first pit stop, and even second pit stop if there is a second pit stop. And we do have as well here in Singapore a 100% record of safety cars being deployed here in Singapore. So pitting at the right time in regards to the safety car is also a very important thing for success in your Grand Prix result for any team on the grid. And we know Ferrari, when it comes to these certain things, as we've seen in many examples this season, they are very poor when it comes to these things. And I think when, push comes to shove, I think Ferrari will get it wrong. They'll make a big error on strategy, and they'll give someone else, the advantage in the race, and will end up losing a Grand Prix that really they should be winning this weekend. So that's what I think will happen. In regards to who will win the Grand Prix this weekend, I'll get into that in a moment, because I think it'll be a bit of a surprise what happens with the race results this weekend. But yeah, they'll have the pace, no doubt about it, but will they actually deliver the result? I think we know the answer to that. So Ferrari, yeah, always have the potential, but they always blow it, as they've done pretty much. Well, I was going to say every Grand Prix this season, but then I remembered they've won 4 races this season. They've done it so many times this season that I'm honestly at this point I'm bored as fuck talking about it, talking about how they're gonna mess things up, to be honest. But yeah, let's get into some stats regarding Ferrari for the Singapore Grand Prix and stats regarding Charles Leclerc as well. So Charles Leclerc, his best finish in Singapore is second from 2019. Bit of a controversial race for him. Because he felt as though he was a bit wronged in the way things happened with the strategy, that Grand Prix. And looking back, I don't think he really had a leg to stand on when it came to that, because at the end of the day, Ferrari turned a 1-3 into a 1-2, because obviously Sebastian Vettel won the last Singapore Grand Prix, as you can see on your screen there, in 2019. And yeah, it was a 1-2 finish for the Ferrari team. And Ferrari have also won in Singapore 3 times since 2010. The victories were Alonso in 2010, a brilliant weekend from Alonso, one of the best drives of his entire career that weekend, to hold off the much faster Red Bull that season, really, behind for the majority of the Grand Prix. And then, Sebastian Vettel in 2015 as well. What a weekend that was for Sebastian, and again, what a drive from Vettel that time in 2015. And I think, again, forgetting what Ferrari are like, they should win this weekend. I don't think there's many excuses that really they could find to justify why they shouldn't win. This track is built for this car, really. It really, really is. So, yeah, from Ferrari's point of view, no excuses, but we know what this team is like. They haven't won a Grand Prix, remember, since the Austrian Grand Prix, which was 2.5 months ago, which feels quite a long time ago, to be honest, in 2022. But now we'll move on from them and go on to the Mercedes team. And yeah, I said obviously a moment ago that I thought Ferrari were not going to win this weekend, and I was going to wait with my prediction. Who I think, sorry, I was going to wait with my prediction as to who I thought was going to win this weekend. And the reason I wanted to wait is because I wanted to wait until this team. Because yes, I think this weekend Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton will get their first win of the season. This will be the Grand Prix where he does it and where Mercedes do it as well. Now, firstly, just hear me out a bit when it comes to how I think this will all occur. Because I know you might be thinking, well, this circuit in terms of the corner layout might not actually or doesn't really suit Mercedes' car as well as other tracks, say like it did for the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. But again, hear me out. So yeah, this track doesn't have a lot of fast corners. That is true. A lot of them are medium speed, and there's quite a lot of slow speed corners as well. And that will hurt Mercedes in qualifying. There is no doubt about it. But excluding that, there are a lot of pluses for the Mercedes team. One, in qualifying, they won't suffer with the tyre warm-up issue because it is so hot in Singapore, and it's such a long lap before your proper lap that they'll not really have that much trouble getting the tyres fired up for their qualifying lap. And secondly, straight line speed doesn't matter here at all. That's why they were so much slower than Ferrari and Red Bull at Monza. So that won't be an issue for the Mercedes team. And thirdly, we know in regards to the race on Sunday, we know that Mercedes look after their tyres the best on the entire grid, let's be honest. And that will be such an important thing in Sunday's Grand Prix, looking after the tyres, and not just looking after the tyres, but keeping them cool for a long enough period of time. Because if their tyres go away in the normal way they have done in the last few races, and if Ferrari are on pole position, then what will happen is Leclerc will probably back up your Verstappens and Sainz's and Perez's, if they are ahead of the two Mercedes, back up into them and bring the two Mercedes into play, even if Mercedes don't have the greatest qualifying, which I don't think Mercedes are going to have a great qualifying session, but I think they will be a lot stronger in the race. Again, because they can keep those tyres a lot cooler and wear them out a lot less than the other two top teams of Ferrari and Red Bull. So that's really the pluses, I think, for Mercedes this weekend. And I think because of those factors, I think Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton will win the Grand Prix. And how I think it'll happen is I think they'll probably qualify the two Mercedes in 4th and 5th, Hamilton 4th, Russell in 5th. And then, like I said, Leclerc will get pole and then probably back up the cars behind him. Out of the top cars, not the entire field, but just the top cars, back them up because Leclerc will be probably struggling with his overheating tyres in that first stint, as the Ferrari has struggled quite a bit with tyre wear in the last few Grand Prix. So yeah, he'll struggle with that, will Charles, and that'll keep, it'll keep Mercedes in the fight, but it'll not allow Max Verstappen, who would be a massive threat to winning the Grand Prix, because it's so hard to overtake at Singapore, it would keep him from being able to make a break for it at the front of the field, unless, of course, he was able to get pole position in Singapore, which would be vital for Red Bull's Grand Prix if he could do that. And yeah, it'll keep the pack close, and it'll keep Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes probably only, I don't know, 3 to 4 seconds off the lead. And then when it gets to the first round of pit stops, what I think will happen is they will either Mercedes do the undercut and gain a shit ton amount of time, or what's one thing they have done with Lewis Hamilton quite a few times this season is run him longer into the race to allow him to have fresher tyres for either just the next stint or the rest of the Grand Prix itself. So yeah, that's what I think will happen, is it will be a strategy decision which allows Lewis Hamilton to get into the lead and win the Grand Prix. Again, whether it be an undercut, similar to what happened with Sebastian Vettel in 2019, or he will, go a few laps longer and have much fresher tyres then for, again, either the second stint or the rest of the race itself, and that will give Hamilton enough of an advantage to win the Singapore Grand Prix. And even though, yes, I did say a few moments ago it will be tough to overtake here, if Hamilton did go for that strategy of going a few laps longer and having the fresher tyres after his pit stop, if he had a pace advantage of like 1.5 seconds or more, that would be enough to overtake even Verstappen or Leclerc in their respective cars. So that's how I think he will get the job done, and Mercedes will get the job done this weekend, and they will finally break the streak, I think, this weekend that they've been on without a race win, which I'll get onto with my stats in a moment. Let me know, guys, by the way, in the chat, do you think Mercedes will win the Grand Prix this weekend? And if you do, let me know how they win that Grand Prix, or win this Grand Prix this weekend. If you don't think so, though, let me know how you think things will play out, and who do you think will win the Grand Prix this weekend. Give me your top 3 if you can in the comments or the live chat right now, and I'll make sure to get to some of your comments in the live chat before we get on with the midfield teams themselves. But yeah, I think Mercedes, I've been saying this for a few races now, I do think they will win a race before the end of the season. I don't think they are that bad that they're not going to win any races before the end of the season. I think they've definitely got a car there that can win a race, but they just need everything, really. Or not everything, but they just need the right amount of things to go their way. At Zandvoort, they had the quickest car. There's no doubt about it. Mercedes had the best car that weekend in the race. In qualifying wasn't quite the case, but in the race, Mercedes had the better car compared to everyone else. But the reason they didn't win that was because they handicapped themselves with a poor strategy, and then the safety car coming out did hamper their Grand Prix quite a bit. And the virtual safety car as well did hamper them quite a bit and didn't really give them the opportunity to have a last-minute dash with Max Verstappen for that win at Zandvoort. And even, in Hungary, there were definitely chances for them to win there had their strategy been a tad better with Hamilton and Russell. I think they probably could have won there as well. So I think, again, they can win with this car, and I think they will get a win for the end of the season. And like I said, I think this weekend will be the weekend where they break that drought. Let's get into some stats regarding the Mercedes team before we get into this weekend's Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton has won the Singapore Grand Prix 4 times since 2009. He won it, obviously, in 2009 with McLaren, and then won it also with Mercedes 3 times in 2014, 2017, and 2018. 2018, that weekend, he was on literally another planet compared to everybody else. There is no doubt about that. Mercedes have also won the Singapore Grand Prix 4 times since 2014. They won in 2014, 2017, and 18 with Lewis Hamilton, like I just said. But also, they won with Nico Rosberg in 2016, who produced a pretty solid drive to hold off Ricciardo for the win that weekend. And Mercedes' last F1 win was 18 races ago, pretty much a whole F1 season in terms of race length, or just under, since their last win in Saudi Arabia in 2021. But yeah, I think this will be the weekend they break that little drought. And to be honest, I hope they do, because it would be a bit boring if the rest of the season it was just Red Bull and Ferrari, winning the rest of the races. And it would be a bit boring if Mercedes were not able to fight for the win as much as they did at Zandvoort or in Hungary, because it does make things a lot more exciting if we have 3 teams up there fighting for the same prize. But I'll quickly cut back to some pictures now of the Red Bull, and I'll alternate pictures as well. Quickly, guys, before I get into the midfield, let me know right now in the live chat, how do you think things will play out? And out of the top 3 teams, let me know, who do you think wins the Singapore Grand Prix this weekend? Let me know right now in the live chat. Just want to say, though, quickly, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you do it right there, because we will be covering the Singapore Grand Prix with lots of content this weekend. And I'll get into that content and what the plan for content is in a second. And for everyone watching right now, if you have not already, make sure to smash the like button if you are to help out the channel. Would be great if you could do that. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 to keep up with content on the channel. But yeah, before I go to your comments in the live chat, again, just want to lay out precisely what my plans are for content this weekend. So obviously I'm doing my weekend preview now. Tomorrow evening at 6 PM UK time, I will be live for my qualifying preview for the Singapore Grand Prix. That is also going live, 3 hours after practice 2 finishes. So yeah, make sure to join me for that. And then on Saturday, I will be going live at 10:45 AM UK time. Firstly for practice 3, which obviously starts at 11 AM UK time, and then I'll be live from all the way till 12 PM UK time to cover practice 3 and do a watch along for that. Then from 12 till 3 PM, or sorry, 12 till 1:30 PM UK time, or not 1:30 PM, from 12 till 2 PM UK time. I get my timings right. I'll be doing a build-up to the qualifying session itself. Then from 2 till 3 PM UK time, I'll be doing a watch-along for qualifying. And then for about half an hour after the session finishes, I'll be doing a reaction to the session itself. And then on Sunday, I'll be going live again, obviously for race day at 11 AM UK time, firstly until 12:30 for the race preview. Then from 12:30 PM until 3 PM UK time, that will be the race watch-along part of the day. So make sure, obviously, to join us for that. The race, by the way, starts at 1 PM UK time. And then for an hour after the race finishes, 3 till 4 PM UK time, I'll be live for the race reaction to react to what's happened in the Singapore Grand Prix. But, yeah, that's the plan this weekend. Let me get into your comments in chat now. And yeah, the porn bot here in good time. Let me just get rid of it quick. There you go. Brandon says, thanks for these previews, Chaz. McLaren from races. Hey, Chaz, about to leave work and head home, but I'll be listening in the car intently. Thanks for the content as always, mate. No problem. Pranks is perfect timing. Hello, Chazza. I don't know. Heard they resurfaced the track, Ferrari and tyre wear. Yeah, they have resurfaced it in some areas. We'll have to just see how that plays out. We don't know exactly who that's gonna suit. We'll have to just see how things play out. Josiah says also, I think this is the weekend Lewis Hamilton wins, so agreeing with me. Will F1 says, I only see Mercedes getting the win if Verstappen has an issue, to be honest. I think it'll be a bit more competitive and complicated than that, but I completely understand why you think that, because, yeah, Verstappen, when it comes to race day and the actual results of race day, Max has dominated proceedings. Josh says, I don't think that Mercedes will be able to overtake Max. Again, though, like I said, if you've got a massive pace advantage due to new tyres, then it doesn't matter, really. I mean, even though Max can make his car incredibly wide, if, let's say, Lewis Hamilton was on like 15-lap fresher tyres compared to Verstappen, there's nothing Max could do, because he would literally be all over the track, off the racing line, defending so much. Eventually he would just slide wide and Hamilton would be able, or Russell or whoever, would be able to find their way through. Fresh tyres in Singapore, the advantage is disgusting. It really is. Like I said, with Vettel in 2019, he was running third, about 2 or 3 seconds off the lead, and the leader was Leclerc. Hamilton was in second. He then pitted, and then he was, 4 seconds quicker on his outlap compared to Leclerc. It's probably the undercut is the most powerful, I would say, at this circuit. There's no other circuit like it when it comes to the power of the undercut. And like I said before, strategy is very important here. Josiah says they win it exactly how you describe Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how the podium will shape up. I think it'll be Hamilton first, Verstappen second. For the rest of the positions, though, I don't have much of a clue, to be honest. It's difficult to say. Especially with George Russell, because Russell has only raced here in a Williams in 2019. The Williams that was, the toothpaste car. That some of you will remember, the horrific Williams car that Russell had to, put up with that year. And I don't remember him doing anything spectacular that weekend. I do remember him being punted into the wall by Romain Grosjean. And, that's what caused, I think, a safety car midway through the race. But, yeah, it's hard to say with Russell, like, how he's going to do. I mean, who knows? Russell might be the quicker Mercedes driver this weekend. Most likely not, but we know how talented he is, but we just don't know what he's like around this track. So we'll see. He should be pretty good. Like I said previously, the top drivers normally show their quality here. Your Vettels, Alonso's, Hamilton's, Verstappen's, in the past. They've shown just how great of a driver they are at this very tough racetrack. Sparky Pete says, Mercedes will run long and finally get some really good luck. I just hope it's Lewis. His race pace is better than Russell anyway, so Lewis first win. Prank says they will try what you said, but King of the Outlap is going to be too fast for everyone on race pace. The thing is, though, it depends. Let's say with Mercedes, and I'll just cut back to them quickly now. Let's say Hamilton and Russell go longer into the race by at least 5 laps, and Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, Perez in the 2 Ferraris, Red Bulls, they, pit and go for the, I guess you wouldn't call it an undercut, but, pit earlier than Mercedes do. If those 4 drivers get a bit caught up in traffic, even though these cars you can overtake a lot more than you could previously, with how much better you can follow and get right up the car ahead. If they lose a bit of time getting their way through traffic, then that would give Mercedes a very good advantage for when they made their pit stop if they went a few laps longer into the Grand Prix. And even if they pitted and then dropped to the positions they were originally in and don't gain any position, they would have so much fresher tyres that it would be very hard for the cars ahead then to keep ahead. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And to be honest as well, I think this weekend there's a very good chance it'll be a 2-stop race. I think the teams will probably aim to do a 1-stop race because if there's no safety cars, which, I mean, the chances is very, very, very unlikely, because like I said, we've had a 100% record of safety cars deployed here in the past. I mean, eventually we will get a Singapore Grand Prix where there's not a safety car, but yeah, so far that hasn't happened. If there wasn't a safety car this weekend, the teams would try to do a one-stop race because it would be too risky to do a two-stop and do a stop more, given, again, the traffic you'd have to come through around a very hard track to overtake at, especially with these wide, heavy cars that we have currently in Formula 1. So, yeah. I think in terms of the strategy in Singapore, a lot of it is reactive to just what's going on, especially with safety cars. So, we'll see how it goes on. Will F1 says Russell has more podiums than Hamilton this year, yet people are hell-bent sure he'll get a win over Russell. I mean, yeah, he does have more podiums than... sorry, he does have more podiums than Hamilton, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, what was it? The first podium Russell had in Australia, Hamilton was screwed over by the safety car, I think was it, or the virtual safety car, and Russell got lucky with that happening at the exact right time for him to pit and come out in third place, I think it was. So, yeah, you had that, and then Barcelona, Hamilton was, I think, behind Russell on track at the start, but was hit by Magnussen, was Hamilton, and then had a puncture, which, you know, didn't help. And then, you know, you had the Dutch Grand Prix where Lewis was screwed over by the poor Mercedes strategy. So even though Russell has had more podiums, that doesn't tell the whole story. And if I look at this season so far, I would say that Russell has had a very good season, very good debut season for Mercedes, but I still think Lewis Hamilton has had the better year, and I think Hamilton is obviously the better driver still. Hamilton definitely struggled a bit at the start of the season, there's no doubt about that, but since Canada, the Canadian Grand Prix, which was, 3.5 months ago, was it? Yeah, 3.5 months ago, about. Hamilton has been, I think, quite clearly better, to be honest. Let's look at some other comments in the chat. Pete Dunn says, I have a bunch of track picks from June of this year if you want any. Yeah, if you hit me up on Discord and, you know, want to supply any, or just post them in our server, that'd be great if you wanted to. And yeah, if anyone who hasn't already joined my Discord server, there's a link below to that server in my description. Simon says, I'd be happy if any driver gave Max some competition this Sunday. As long as we get a competitive race, that's all I care about. I could give a fuck who wins, to be honest. I'm just hoping, because the Italian Grand Prix at Monza was a bit of a false dawn with what happened. Because what I was hoping for, with Max having his grid penalty and starting from, I think, P7 it was, I thought Verstappen was going to win. And I just, you know, Red Bull were too quick, Max was too quick. But what I was hoping for was like a last 15-lap battle on track between Max and Leclerc and a bit of an exciting finish. We didn't get that. It was just, yeah, very, very easy for Verstappen to win that race. Will F1 says Hamilton has had an overrated season. He was poor early in the season. There was a reason Hamilton was 37 points behind Russell after Baku. Just sorry for the silence. I was just trying to think of the start of the season and, you know, how it was faring between Russell and Hamilton. I mean, the first race, Bahrain, Hamilton was, you know, better, pretty clearly. And then the second race, yeah, Hamilton was just not good enough. I know the car wasn't quite set up the way he liked, but he was just not good enough that weekend. There's no doubt about it, even though he did put in a good race performance. Melbourne, Hamilton got unlucky. He was better than Russell that weekend, and he really deserved to be on the podium that weekend for his drive. And then Imola, yeah, Hamilton wasn't good enough, even though I think a lot of his struggles were down to Mercedes' lack of pace that weekend. He definitely didn't put in as good of a performance as he should. Miami, Russell got pretty lucky there because Hamilton was what? I think didn't Russell qualify 12th that weekend and Hamilton was 6th, I think, running behind Bottas, who was 5th, amazingly, that weekend. Feels so long ago, that Grand Prix. And then the safety car happened at the right time, and then Russell got on fresher tyres and then beat Hamilton. Again, luck there for Russell, really. And then, yeah, Spain and Monaco, I think we could say Russell was just a better driver, and Baku as well. But, yeah, in that first 8 races, Russell, I would say, was better just about over Hamilton, but it wasn't dominant in terms of their respective performance. And even though, yeah, Russell had like you said, a 37-point gap, that doesn't tell the whole story. But he was better in that first 8 races, there's no doubt about it. But since then, since the Canadian Grand Prix, Hamilton has been better at pretty much every Grand Prix except for the odd, like, qualifying or race session here or there, like, qualifying in Hungary. Even though Hamilton did have a DRS issue, I think Russell still would have got on pole anyway. The race at Spa, I guess you could say as well, with Hamilton's, mistake driving into Alonso. Other than those things, I can't really think of any other examples of where Russell was better than Hamilton since the Canadian Grand Prix. So, yeah. Sparky Pete says Russell has had way more safety car luck than Russell. Good point, Chaz. I think you must mean Hamilton, Pete. He goes on to say, yeah, Lewis also had all the failed tests in his cars. When that stopped, Lewis was better. Yeah, that's important to remember. He did a lot of the testing in practice sessions to try and find some miracle setup, which didn't help. And Sparky Pete goes on to say that when Lewis stopped being the team's main test car subject, everything changed. Equal cars, Lewis beats Russell, no disrespect, he's the GOAT. Willifont says people just can't accept Hamilton was underperforming. He was underperforming, I'm not denying that. He was definitely not at his best in the first 8 races of the season. Like I said, Saudi Arabia, that weekend, not good enough. Imola, not good enough. Monaco and Baku, I'd probably say not good enough as well. Definitely Baku, just not good enough, even though he was suffering with a bit of an injury. Still, I don't think he was good enough that weekend. But I don't think he was, terrible or poor. He just wasn't at his best. We have to remember, his best level is incredibly high. So, when he's not absolutely on it, it does appear with him. It does appear with him that, he's miles off it. But I will say with Lewis Hamilton that looking at his performances since the Canadian Grand Prix and this season in general, if he was in a car that was as good as the Ferrari and Red Bull at the minute, I think Lewis would be right there with Verstappen in the championship, and I have not that much doubt about it. I mean, Russell would be right up there as well. He'd be, very, very close. But, yeah, I think Lewis has had a good season. I don't think he's been terrible. I think people who think he's been terrible, very poor, I think they're just massively overrating the season he's had in terms of it being bad rather than good. But, yeah, I think Lewis has had a very good season. Still, just hasn't had the car to compete. Same with George Russell. If them two had a front-running car, again, as quick as Ferrari and Red Bull, they would be such a threat to the Red Bull and Ferrari teams and their respective drivers. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of the teams, because we've still got a load of teams to go through. And we'll go on to, of course, the McLaren team. Coming to this weekend's Grand Prix, in terms of the track layout, it should suit them better than Alpine. Certainly for Lando Norris, who just has a better way in this McLaren car compared to Daniel Ricciardo, who has eternally struggled with this 2022 McLaren for a multitude of reasons. But there is also a bit of a interesting thing to look out for with McLaren, which is a new a new upgrade. They have, I think, a new side pod inlet on their car that has been pictured. Now, the reason I'm not going to show it on stream tonight is because we haven't had it confirmed in regards to who has what upgrades for this weekend. So I want to wait till tomorrow's stream at 6 p.m. UK time. Again, my qualifying preview for the Singapore Grand Prix. I'm going to wait till then until I get into the proper upgrades for all of the teams. Because again, we don't know the exact upgrades. Because there's, we've had pictures of the McLaren. There's also some pictures of a new front wing design for AlphaTauri. A new floor for Alpine, apparently. And I think there might even be a new couple little bits on the Ferrari as well. And there's even been rumours on the Mercedes side. So I want to wait till tomorrow until I can absolutely confirm what upgrades are on what cars, because that will obviously have an effect on this weekend's Grand Prix, where if you can get a new upgrade on your car, that aerodynamic upgrade that gives you quite a bit more time, it will really show up around a track like this. If you remember back in 2019, Ferrari brought a massive upgrade, I remember, to this Grand Prix. I think a completely new floor design and rear part of the car, I think it was, or bargeboard area as well. And they were like a second quicker than expected. With that upgrade. So it can have a massive effect, a new upgrade here in Singapore. But yeah, McLaren, for getting the upgrade, they should be pretty quick. Lando Norris will definitely be in the top 10. He will be at worst probably P8 on the grid, and as long as nothing major goes wrong for him, he will finish in the points. This is, as well, a very good chance for McLaren after the Italian Grand Prix, where they surprisingly outscored Alpine, and Alpine had a very surprisingly poor weekend as a team at a Grand Prix where we expected them, compared to McLaren, to be so much better. They had such a poor weekend. And now that McLaren have scored a few points over them, and they've got the momentum heading back in their direction, they've got to capitalise on that. Because the gap, you have to remember, it's only 18 points between Alpine and McLaren. It's not over yet. If McLaren were to outscore Alpine by another 6 points here, then, that's down to 12 points, just over 10 points. And if, there's a race in the final 5 races in Japan, USA, Mexico, Brazil, or Abu Dhabi, where we get some wet weather or loads of retirements, and McLaren can benefit on that, then they could absolutely get back into 4th in the championship. So it's not quite over yet. I still think Alpine will finish 4th in the championship, but it's definitely, the fight for that position is definitely on. And yeah, Norris, I think, will be in the top 10. For Daniel Ricciardo, given his lack of confidence in a minute, I just don't see him being in the top 10 this weekend, really, at all. I mean, he could get in the points in the race, but I think it would depend a bit on, say, a couple retirements in the field for that to happen for Ricciardo. I know, obviously, last Grand Prix at Monza, he was having a great race. He was running in, what was he running in 8th place, and then his engine failed, or something failed on his car, and was driving very well, but yeah, he just doesn't have, Ricciardo, the confidence at the minute, really, to be getting a great result in Singapore. And confidence is something you need a lot of at this circuit if you're going to perform well. You have to have not just the confidence in yourself, but the belief in the car that you can go out there and really throw the car at the corners and attack the track. Because in Singapore, if you do attack the track, as long as you don't attack it too hard, you can get a lot of time out of this circuit. And I don't think Ricciardo's quite in that mindset unfortunately, at the moment. But yeah, McLaren will be fine, and they'll probably be in the top 10 with Lando Norris. We'll see if they can outscore the Alpine team, who, yeah, very poor Grand Prix at Monza. And they come to this Grand Prix, we believe, with a new floor design, a new aggressive floor design that could give them quite a bit more time in the corners. We'll have to see whether that does play out and does indeed, or is indeed the case here in Singapore. And I think, really, even if they didn't have this upgrade, I always thought Alpine were going to be quick here. Not just because their car is overall a pretty good car out of that midfield pack, but also because both drivers are pretty competitive at this circuit, judging from history. Esteban Ocon finished in a couple qualifying sessions, I think, in the top 10 here, before India/Racing Point, when the car wasn't exactly, I think in 2018, the car wasn't, amazing around a track like this at the time. And yeah, he did pretty well, but then got punted into the wall by his teammate, Sergio Perez, in a very dramatic incident on the first lap of that Grand Prix. But for Fernando Alonso, as we'll get into in a moment, Fernando's record at Singapore is incredible, considering that he's not exactly had a massively great car to drive since the Singapore Grand Prix appeared on the calendar in 2008. He's obviously been driving some front-running cars here or there, but he's never had like a 2010s, early 2010s Red Bull or a mid to late 2010s Mercedes or anything like that to be able to have great success here. It's really been down to himself as to the great results he's had in Singapore, and that is, I think, the man to look at this weekend. Is Fernando Alonso. If anyone in the midfield is going to get a surprise result and maybe get in the top 5, it will be Alonso, because, like I said, his track record here in Singapore is just incredible. And let's get into it now with some stats. So Alonso, he's taken the podium in Singapore 5 times. The 5 podiums in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, and 2013. And he's won the Singapore Grand Prix twice since the first ever one in 2008. Obviously, 2008 was Crashgate, and yeah, he didn't deserve to win that race. He was gifted the win because of Renault telling Alonso's teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash on purpose, but he was still very, very quick that weekend. And I think the only reason he qualified in 15th was because he had a fuel pickup problem, when he would have been really high on the grid if it wasn't for that. So that's kind of why Renault did what they did, because they knew they had the pace to probably get a podium at least from that Grand Prix that weekend. And also, this is a great stat, and I think it's a great stat in showing just how great Alonso has been in Singapore despite the cars he's driven. Alonso has finished in the points in every Singapore Grand Prix he's raced in, except for 2015 and 2017. 2015, he had a reliability problem, I think, in the McLaren, and 2017, he was hit off and had his car severely damaged by that Verstappen, Raikkonen, Vettel crash at the start in 2017. And in the last Singapore Grand Prix, he did, in 2018, in a McLaren car that season was pretty bad. I know that weekend it was quite a bit more competitive because it was very well suited to the circuit. But he finished in 7th place in the 2018 Singapore Grand Prix. Even in the 2016 McLaren, he finished in 7th place as well, did Alonso. So, yeah, his record here in Singapore is just incredible. Even for Ferrari, winning in 2010 with a Ferrari car that really shouldn't have won that Grand Prix, given how the pecking order was at the time, especially for a track like that, and the advantages or what cars would have been suited to that track at the time. And then, was on the podium for Ferrari in 2012 and 2013, again, when the car was not that great. around the track and wasn't as good as other cars out there, such as the McLaren or the Red Bull or the Mercedes or the Lotus at the time. And even, I think, back in 2009, in quite a poor, mediocre Renault car, he finished on the podium. And I think that was the weekend where Renault were, I think, punished, or maybe the weekend before, where Renault were punished for Crashgate. So it was a good result he delivered for the Renault team that weekend. But look out for Fernando Alonso. He has an incredible record here in Singapore. And to be honest, if he had had a Red Bull that Vettel had during his peak era, or the Mercedes that Lewis Hamilton has had since 2014, Alonso would have won this race quite a bit more than just twice. He would have won it probably 5 or 6 times because he's been that competitive in Singapore. But we'll now move on to the rest of the teams, and we will go on to Alfa Romeo. Not much to say about him, really. I mean, Zhou Guanyu finishing the points in the last Grand Prix. Good result for him. Good result for the team to pull an extra point clear in their fight to stave off the teams behind and get a very impressive top 6 Constructors Championship result. The only other news, really, I can think of when it comes to Alfa Romeo is that this man on screen, Zhou Guanyu, has officially been confirmed for Alfa Romeo for 2023. Only a 1-year deal, which is interesting, but yeah, he's been confirmed for next year, and I think deserves another year. Does he, or is he truly, or has he so far truly proven that he is good enough for Formula 1? I don't think so, but I do think he has deserved more time to be able to show how good he really is. We have to remember as well that at the start of the season, Zhou wasn't quite at it. And then when he did improve his performance compared to his teammate Valtteri Bottas, the Alfa Romeo car, at the same time, unfortunately, sorry, let me redo that. Unfortunately for Zhou, got worse at the same time he got better. So that's why we've not been able to see just how good he's been as of late. Kind of similar to when Antonio Giovinazzi was at Alfa Romeo in his first year, where Giovinazzi, I think the first half of 2019 was quite poor compared to Kimi Räikkönen, and when he did improve, at the same time, Alfa Romeo's car went downhill with its pace, which was just not good for him, because he didn't really get to show just how quick or good he truly was at the time. So I hope that next year Alfa Romeo can at least develop the car a bit better than this year, because this year Alfa Romeo haven't really gone forward with this car, and that is mostly down to them being a much smaller team than the other teams, especially the teams they've been fighting with in 2022. But yeah, we'll see how that goes next year. But yeah, this weekend, I mean, we know they've got good race pace and they do look after their tyres pretty well. So, yeah, they will have that advantage at least. And as long as they keep out of trouble, they will probably be in the fight for a final couple points. But we'll have to see ultimately what happens with that. We'll now go on to Haas F1. It's very difficult to say what's going to happen with them this weekend, because obviously the last aero-heavy track we went to, which was Zandvoort, they were pretty quick with Mick Schumacher, who qualified in 8th place and was decently quick in the race as well. Not, miles off the pace, but had a decent amount of pace compared to what I expected coming out of that Grand Prix. And yeah, he was putting a decent performance that weekend, and Haas were a lot quicker that weekend than I expected. Kevin Magnussen, for some reason, that weekend was just nowhere around that track. I don't quite know why, but yeah, it's hard to say with Haas in regards to where they're going to be, because their strengths and weaknesses has fluctuated so much this season. In the first half of the season, they were normally quicker at the higher speed tracks and, tracks with more straights, stuff like that. But since their new upgrade, it's now completely shifted, it feels like. Now they're a lot more competitive at higher downforce tracks, it feels like. And the, say, power tracks, they are quite slow. At Monza, for example, Haas had probably the worst car on the grid at the Italian Grand Prix. I know they didn't finish absolutely last with both cars, but we saw where Nick de Vries was, for example, in that Grand Prix, in the Williams car that normally is the slowest car on the grid. So, yeah, Haas were just very, very slow in what would have been quite surprising if you told me a couple months previous after the Austrian Grand Prix, where Haas finished in 6th and 8th, that they would be so slow at the power track of Monza. But that's just the way things have gone, sadly, for them. But yeah, Haas, we'll just have to see what they do. It'll be interesting to see how Mick Schumacher gets on, because he's never raced around Singapore before. And like I said before, this is a very good track for showing the qualities of the drivers. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with the challenge, and when it comes to qualifying, how or what sort of pace he can show in that car. If he can put in a good performance, it really will help him a lot in his bid to be on the grid next year, which is a bit funny, thinking that he actually might not be on the grid. Not in laughing at him. Sorry, not in a laughing at him type of way, but yeah, 2-3 months ago, I couldn't really imagine, once his performances started to improve, I couldn't really imagine this discussion of him not being on the grid for next year being up in the air. Ultimately, I think he will be in the Haas car next year, but we'll have to see what happens with that. And we'll move on. Now, with the final 3 teams, next up, AlphaTauri. Like I said, they have, I believe, a new front wing design for this Grand Prix, so we'll see how that helps them this weekend. Front end grip, definitely very important here, because there are lots of slow corners where you've got to get your front end in. If you don't, you leave mountains of time on the table. So if it does work for them, then it could really step their game up compared to how they've been really this season with this car that's been quite disappointing, to be honest, considering where they were in 2021. But Pierre Gasly, looking back at his history around this track, he was pretty good here for Toro Rosso in 2019 in the last Singapore Grand Prix, where he finished in 8th. Yuki Tsunoda is another driver that has never raced around this track before. So, Tsunoda, no disrespect to the guy, but he's probably going to cause a couple red flags this weekend as he tries to work out quite where the limit is for this circuit. But, we'll see what Pierre Gasly can do. And also with Gasly, just to let you guys know, because obviously he's rumoured to be going maybe to Alpine next year, he came out today and said that they would, or that people would hear the conclusion of this story, or where he's driving next year. They would hear about it probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So by the time we get to the US Grand Prix, we should know where he is driving for 2023. And Yuki Tsunoda, of course, we know is racing for AlphaTauri in 2023. It was confirmed a few days ago that Tsunoda is continuing for 2023. I know I've just seen Will F1 in the chat saying Tsunoda doesn't deserve another contract, but given how he's performed this season, I think he does deserve another go, because I don't think he's been that bad this year. It's a shame, really, with Tsunoda, because he's improved his performance quite a bit compared to Gasly, but the car has got a lot worse. If he was this competitive as he's been this season compared to Gasly, if he was like that last year, Tsunoda would have been one of the stories of the season. He really would have been. But yeah, last season obviously was a very trying season. This season he's improved, but the car just hasn't been there quite for him. But let's move on to the next team, which is Aston Martin. Aston Martin looking forward to this Grand Prix because of their new higher downforce rear wing that they ran in Hungary. They think it will really help their pace around this track. To be honest, looking back at their performance, in what do you call it, Zandvoort, and then looking how they did at Monza, you have to agree with that that sentiment that statement rather with Aston Martin, because it does seem as though now their car is better at the higher downforce tracks. They just don't have the straight line speed with this car to compete at the higher speed racetracks. So they should be decently competitive here, and in clear air, I think Aston Martin will probably have one of the quickest cars out of that midfield pack. So watch out for Aston Martin this weekend, because they will definitely be contenders for a couple points, maybe even more if we get a few retirements and some craziness happening at the Grand Prix. But before I move on to the final team, let's make sure to remember a certain driver, this man, Sebastian Vettel, when it comes to Singapore Grand Prix, because Sebastian Vettel is historically the man for Singapore. He won the last Singapore Grand Prix in 2019 with Ferrari. He's won the Singapore Grand Prix 5 times since 2011. He's won it, twice for Ferrari and 3 times for Red Bull. And Sebastian holds the record for most wins in Singapore. Vettel has 5 wins, Hamilton has 4. So, yeah, Vettel is the king of Singapore, and it's going to be a bit sad to see Sebastian for one final time race around this track, because he has had so many great performances here in Singapore. Even for Toro Rosso, he finished, I think, 5th or 6th at this track in 2008. He's always been really competitive here in Singapore, and yeah, some of the best moments here in Singapore when it comes to stunning qualifying laps and just stunning performances, he's definitely a forefront of those memories. And as well, Sebastian Vettel has kind of announced or teased a documentary that is coming out in regards to his life/career. Let me just get up on Twitter, then I can show you guys on screen. He posted it on Instagram. Let me just find it. Autosport posted it earlier, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. Well, Autosport posted a lot. See if I can find it. Here we go. And I'll just quickly show us on screen. So yeah, Sebastian Vettel posted this on Instagram, like a little clip of, I think this is Hockenheim and him in what you call it, like a lower formula single seater back in the day, like 2004, 2005-ish. And yeah, he was asked about this later in the day, and basically he didn't announce fully, yeah, there's a documentary coming out about my career, but yeah, this is pretty much what it is. Sebastian Vettel is going to have a documentary coming out, probably on Netflix. It should be a good one. He's had quite a long F1 career, motorsport career. He's been in the F1 world, and his first, F1 drive in a practice session was back in 2006, which was, 16 years ago. So there's plenty of content to go through with Vettel. And even though, in my view, Sebastian, let's just go back to him here. Even though Sebastian, I don't rate him as highly as he has placed himself statistically, because statistically, Sebastian Vettel is, the third? Is he the third greatest of all time in terms of race wins? Let me just look quickly. I think he is a 3rd or 4th or something like that. Let me just have a quick look. Obviously, I know the championships, he's got the fourth most titles, or joint fourth. Yeah, he's got the third most race wins. Has Sebastian Vettel 53 wins, 2 more than Prost, 12 more than Senna. One thing that is quite scary though is Max Verstappen is already tied for 7th in the total wins record, and he only needs 2 more to overtake Mansell and Alonso. And then, if he gets those 2 more, he'll only be 8 away from Ayrton Senna. Fuck me, that is terrifying that he's doing it that quickly. I mean, he's only what? He's how old is he now? Verstappen 20. He's now 20. Oh no, he's 20. Max turns 25 tomorrow. Interestingly, so yeah, 25 years old pretty much. And Max is, yeah, he's 10 away at the minute from Senna, 20 from Prost, and 22 away from Vettel. Yeah, Max is going to be 3rd in the total wins record column, probably in about 3 years from now, 3 or 4 years from now. But yeah. But yeah, with Sebastian Vettel, yeah, I don't rate. The point I was trying to make is I don't rate him as highly as his stats, put him, which is like one of the top 3-4 best of all time. I don't quite rate him as highly as that, but he has had a great career. There is no doubt about it, and he has been incredibly successful. And Formula One will definitely be a poorer place without him. And looking back at his career, I mean, obviously, I'm going to do my own video about Sebastian Vettel and his career. I don't rate him quite as highly as I do Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, but even though I don't rate him as highly as those two, he's still, he's still had an amazing career and still been very, very good throughout his entire career. His level was never really, until these last couple of years, dropped off. Sebastian. So yeah, he's had a fantastic career. I'd say for this era of Formula One, the last 20 years or so, he definitely goes down as a great driver. I wouldn't say he's an all-time great driver, which for me, if you didn't know, is, I'd say all-time great driver, for my definition, is someone who would be great in any era. I wouldn't quite say Sebastian is that great, but yeah, he's had a fantastic career, so it'll be interesting to see what that documentary is about and, just how good it is. Finally, though, let's go on to Williams. And, yeah, this picture I wanted to show. Alex Albon is back in the car. Bit of a poorly timed picture with him talking to Mick Schumacher and, the gesture he's doing there, but yeah, he's back in the car this weekend, and I hope he can get back on it and not be anywhere, or not be slower or just off compared to where he was before. His very serious health concern or health worries that he was going through. So I hope he has a good weekend and he goes through nothing too major in a bad way. Obviously, Williams this weekend are going to be the slowest team because they just don't have the downforce levels of the other teams. That's why they were so quick at Monza, the most highest speed racetrack on the calendar. But yeah, good to see our little Albon back in Formula One after respiratory failure. I think, 2 weeks ago it was now? Yeah, good to see him back. But let me read out a final few comments, and then we will get to the end of the stream. Yeah, Willafon says, Tsunoda's been very disappointing since Canada, apart from a couple qualifying and races. I wouldn't say very disappointing, but he maybe has been a bit sluggish, but again, I think the AlphaTauri car has been pretty poor this year, to be honest. Pranks as AlphaTauri have been disappointing this year, period, indeed. And Willafont says, to be honest, both AlphaTauri drivers have underperformed this year, in his opinion. Gasly has done well in the last 3 races, though. Yeah, it's good to see Pierre step up again because up until the summer break, Pierre had a very poor season. I mean, where is Pierre in the championship? Let me just wait till it scrolls past on the bottom ticker. He's what, 12th or 13th, I think? Let me just look. Oh, no, he's 11th, actually, which is surprising because I thought he had a worse season than that. Level on points there with Kevin Magnussen. You can see, look, how far he is behind 10th, Valtteri Bottas, 24 points. Yeah, I did not see that coming, really, at all. Given how the pace of those two cars has been pretty much similar for most of the season. So, yeah, that's not great. And, yeah, Gasly's not had a good season. I mean, let's look at where he finished last year in the championship quick. Gasly last year finished 9th in the championship, but he only finished behind what? The two Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren drivers. So he was best of the rest after the top 4 teams, which is pretty impressive still because he still beat Alonso, Ocon, Vettel, who were, decent last year. So, yeah. But, yeah, I think that's pretty much all the comments, guys. And that is pretty much the end of the stream. Again, though, quickly, reminder of my schedule for this weekend. I will be live tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time, 3 hours after practice 2 is finished, for the qualifying preview for the Singapore Grand Prix. We'll go through data from practice going into qualifying, look at all the teams and how they did, and get into... just with all the data, just how it is going to play out in qualifying, in my view, for Saturday. And then on Saturday, I'll be going live to start at 10:45 a.m. UK time. And then from 10:45 a.m. till 12 p.m, I'll be live for the Practice 3 watch along. 12 till 2 p.m. UK time, I'll be live for the build-up to qualifying. And then 2 till 3 p.m. UK time will be the qualifying watch along itself. And then for half an hour or so after the qualifying finishes, I'll be live to react with you guys to the events of qualifying. And then on Sunday, obviously we're live for race day for quite a while. I'll be going live at 11 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts. My race preview, that'll be going from 11 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And then from 12:30 p.m. till 3 p.m. UK time will be the race watch along. And then... and remember, the race, again, starts at 1 p.m. UK time on Sunday. And then for about an hour after the race finishes, I'll be live with a reaction to the race itself. And a reminder as well, there will be no Monday stream or video unless something actually properly mental happens in the Singapore Grand Prix. I'm going to save a Monday, a day after the race stream or video. I'm going to save that until probably the Japanese Grand Prix. We've got a pretty busy week next week with uni as well. So, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that for Singapore. But, yeah, I'll be coming for Japan most likely. But, yeah, that's content scheduled for this weekend for the Singapore Grand Prix. So, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And for everyone watching right now, if you haven't already, don't forget to smash the like button on this video. And also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. And check out my latest videos on the channel. I think my last video was on Monday about how Red Bull overcame the early F1 2022 deficit to Ferrari and how basically Red Bull outdeveloped Ferrari in the development race and the World Championship race in 2022. Make sure to go check that video out that was uploaded on Monday. But guys, until my qualifying preview for this weekend's Singapore Grand Prix that goes live tomorrow again at 6 p.m. UK time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.